Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. My name's Louise and today our lesson is on persuasive writing. So what is writing to persuade? When we want to persuade someone, we want them to accept our opinion on an issue. So we want to change that person's mind to our way of thinking. Obviously, we've all probably done this at home, trying to persuade our parents of something or our brothers or sisters of something, but there are lots of proper techniques that we can use when we're doing a formal persuasive speech or piece of persuasive writing like a letter or anything like that. Obviously, that's not to say you can't use these techniques at home as well, but this is the context that we're going to be learning them in. When we're trying to persuade someone or an audience, we have to be very aware of who that person or those people are. We want to try and create a link with them by establishing a common goal or common areas of expertise with them, and not by irritating them, by ignoring their needs. So we have to really be aware about who these people are. And first of all, there are three different types of what we call appeals that we can use. These are appeal to reason, that's what that top one says, appeal to character, and appeal to emotion. So let's have a look at what those three things mean. So first of all is the appeal to reason. So most people believe themselves to be reasonable people. They believe that they think sensibly and they think with logic. So appealing to a person's sense of reason is a very effective way to convince them to change their way of thinking. So we're saying things like, listen to all of my logic, and then if we don't follow this logic, then these bad things will happen. So we're trying to lay out for them a very ordered, sensible argument that they can follow and think, well, that makes sense, that sounds sensible, I'm a reasonable person, so I should understand that. Okay, so what we do is we acknowledge their opinion, we acknowledge that they might have a different opinion, but we have to try and dissuade them by showing that our opinion is more reasonable. It's the more logical or sensible opinion. We do this by providing evidence to support our ideas, so facts, statistics. And another thing that we can do is use something called emotive facts. So we can use facts, but because we're being persuasive, we don't have to provide entirely what we would call neutral facts. So if you see another video I've made on advertising techniques, you can see how we can actually manipulate facts in our favour. So the way we do this is to make an emotive fact. Let's have a look. We've got this example of approximately 10 million turkeys are killed in November and December each year. We turn that into an emotive fact just by changing a few of the bits of vocabulary. So, millions of helpless turkeys are slaughtered in just 2 months every year just to adorn our tables at Christmas. We're saying the same information, we're just saying it in a way which I say pulls on heartstrings. So you want to do that pulling on heartstrings approach, use emotive vocabulary, those emotional words like helpless, slaughtered instead of killed. That's a good example of seeing how we can change our vocabulary to make our facts more emotive. The next appeal then is an appeal to character. So we all share kind of common ideas of what is just and what's fair, and appealing to our audience's sense of what is right and what is fair can also be another powerful persuasive device. What we're doing here is we're trying to convince our audience that me and you and I, we're very similar. We share parallel ideas and views on things, so if we're similar, then we should be sharing lots of opinions. And one way that we can do this is by creating a sense of shared personal or cultural experience. We're going to see an example of that in a second. Another way of doing this is by using anecdotes. Then your audience feel like they've shared real experiences with you. If you tell them a relatable story from your life, from your week, they can relate to you and feel like you're a normal person that they can understand and connect with. And these illustrative kind of real stories add a human and personal dimension that can be really fascinating for the audience. But what we have to remember when we're trying to make these appeal to character connections is we need to be respectful. We have to use an appropriate tone to suit our audience and our purpose. So for example, if I'm talking to my friends, I might use more casual language like, all right, how are you? We wouldn't be like that if we're talking to an audience of our teachers, for example. We would say, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Yeah, so we have to choose our respectful tone. We also have to be modest. No one likes listening to someone who's arrogant, impolite, big-headed. So even though we're trying to convince people of our opinion and that we are right, we want to do it in a way where we still sound modest and down to earth. The last thing is to be concerned. So this is concerned about other people's opinions and other people's concerns. It's not showing that just because we have different opinions, mine is the only one which is completely correct. It's showing that I'm also concerned about listening to all opinions and I've taken them into account. This is an example of creating a shared personal or cultural experience. So this is a speech by this man here, Martin Luther King, who was a black rights activist in America. And the man below is Abraham Lincoln, one of the early presidents of the United States. So this is a speech by Martin Luther King who refers to Abraham Lincoln, saying, 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who've been seared in the flames of withering justice. So we've already seen loads of techniques in that short bit, but just to think about, why would this speech not have been as effective in, for example, France rather than the United States? And it's because Martin Luther King is creating a shared cultural experience with his American audience by referring to Abraham Lincoln, this renowned and very well-loved American figure. It wouldn't work if we were trying to connect with a French audience. It might, but we would be much better placed to choose a figure from French history, a well-loved ex-French politician. Okay, so these are the kind of ways that we can make a personal connection with our audience. For example, if it's a speech to your class, you can talk about things that you all relate to in school. For example, how lunchtime works, what you like about break time, what might be annoying about school. All these things you can use to create an appeal to character. The final appeal is an appeal to emotion. So this is just about a speech is persuasive when it sounds really authentic and passionate. And this requires a confident tone as well. You clearly aren't that interested in something if you can't speak about it passionately and with confidence, because generally the things that we're interested in, we know things about. And also our vocabulary normally changes when we're talking about something that we're passionate about. We choose different words. We choose normally more descriptive words. And also our choice of vocabulary in general is really important because of the connotations they have. So connotation basically means, what do I think of when you say that word? So looking at these three examples, building, house, home, it's kind of a spectrum. The top one we think of as quite clinical. We don't really have an emotional attachment to it. It might be the place we go to work or a random building down the street. And then we come down and we have house, which feels a little bit more personal. And then home, the most personal of all. They're all buildings, they're all structures that people either live or work in, but the vocabulary that we choose change the feeling that we have towards that word. And this is a really important thing in your speech and a good way to use an appeal to emotion. So there are three appeals. We also have a load of techniques that you can use. We're just going to go through an acronym of techniques quickly today, so we can use this PERSUADE acronym to help us remember them. So power of three, emotive language, rhetorical questions, say again, that's kind of repetition, undermine opposing views, anecdotes, direct address, and exaggeration. So just using the acronym PERSUADE to help you remember them. So power of three, also known as tripling. This is often used in literature, speeches, poetry, all these things just to emphasize a point. So the writer makes one point and intensifies it by saying it 3 times to make the idea seem more extreme, more persuasive. So for example, what's needed now is time, effort, and money. We often find things coming in lists of 3 and they are super powerful. Right, the next one we have is emotive language or emotive imagery. I put this picture of Puss in Boots here with the kind of puppy dog eyes because I always think of this when I think of emotive language. It's creating a picture which makes an image as strong as this in your head. So the example we've got here, my daughter sees very little of me as it is. I leave the house at 7 a.m. and return home at 4 p.m, then spend the whole night working. Most of the time she sits on the sofa looking sadly at me, wishing I had more time to spend with her. So this for me really makes this kind of Puss in Boots, puppy dog eyes image. So it's using these words to really create a strong image for your listeners of what you want to show. The next is rhetorical questions. You've probably heard of these before. It's asking a question to engage our listeners or our readers, to make them listen up to what we're asking and think about the answer to the question, even when we don't actually want them to tell us the answer. When we're in the middle of our speech, if I say, "So, why are we all here today?" I don't really want my audience putting their hands up and telling me why they're here today. I'm just inviting them to think about it, and it makes them listen to us more. The next thing we have, the S in persuade, is say again. This is also repetition of the same word, phrase, or structured phrase. Again, just to emphasize our point so our audience won't forget it. A very famous use of this technique was in Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. So that man we saw earlier on the PowerPoint, the black rights activist. He, in his most famous speech, repeated the phrase, "I have a dream that one day, I have a dream that one day," and it's really stuck because it was such a well-structured speech and a very persuasive speech which used lots of these techniques. The next thing, the U, is really important, is undermining opposing views. So we can't ignore the counter-arguments. We can't ignore what the other side might say. What we should do is think about what the opposition, what the other side might say, and then show our audience why that's not a very good argument. So for example, we've got our argument overall is that technology is a good thing. And then we've got two problem arguments, problems from our opposition saying why technology isn't a good thing. So we have to take these problems and kind of punch them out and show why our argument is still strong. So for example, problem 1, technology is too expensive. We would then have a counter argument to that, a rebuttal, by saying some people believe that technology is expensive, but, and then something like, it's worth every penny. Okay? Or problem 2, technology is difficult to use. Our counter argument would be, although you may think that technology is difficult to use, I can assure you that with the right level of training, everyone can use it. Okay, so we're taking the counter argument and we're saying, that's not a good argument, my position is still the best. So undermining opposing views, super important. The next one we've already kind of seen a little bit is anecdotes, telling little stories from our lives to relate to our audience. So things like, when I was a child, just yesterday, last time this happened to me. It makes you seem relatable and human, and it makes your audience think, oh, well, actually, I had an experience like that as well, so I can understand what this person's saying. So anecdotes are a really good technique. The next thing we have is direct address. This is using something we called personal pronouns. So you, we, our, and especially those collective pronouns as well, like we and our, show that we're kind of in this together. Using the direct address of you, us, it's showing that you are talking to your audience. You're not just talking to some random people anywhere. You are addressing them, and it's more like you're having an actual conversation with them. So it makes them more likely to listen to you and feel like we're on this side together. Like it says here, you must see that we as teachers should be sticking together. It's our job to do something. It makes it feel like we're all in this together and like you're supporting them as well. The final technique is exaggeration, and kind of the formal literary word for this is hyperbole. So if you ever hear anyone saying hyperbole, it really just means exaggeration. So it's basically another way of just adding emphasis to your point. So one that we might have used before, that walk felt 1,000,000 miles long, or this car journey is going on forever. It's not going on forever, obviously it's going to end, but it's just exaggerating your point, and sometimes help to make the opposition's argument seem ridiculous if you exaggerate your own point. It's maybe an easier one of all these techniques to get in there, so do try and pack as many of these in when you're doing your persuasive writing, your 3 appeals and your persuade acronym techniques. If you can get any or all of those in, I'm sure you'll be writing a fantastic speech. So thank you very much for listening to me today, and I hope I'll see you in some of my other videos as well. Thank you, bye!